When it comes to moral questions, God nearly always provides us with a two-state response. Every moral issue to him is binary. It's either right or wrong, good or evil, black or white. There are no in-betweens, and there are no shades of grey. For example, when it comes to the area of theft, God's command is simply that it's evil to take another person's possessions. Do not steal. That's his command. There's no wiggle room for changing circumstances, no exceptions to the rule. You must simply never steal, and that's the end of it. The same goes for murder, adultery, lying, and all the rest. It's always right or wrong with God. It's always black or white. Now, this is a very inconvenient state of affairs. The truth is, we often wish there were more grey areas with God. We have sinful impulses that we like to act upon, and it's frustrating when we find ourselves bumping into the unyielding commands of God. We're experts at trying to find grey areas that simply don't exist, and we're masters at self-deception when we try to convince ourselves that we found some. There is one moral issue in the Bible, however, that genuinely does not conform to this two-state rule. There's one issue where God explicitly gives us a three-state solution. And it's in the area of marriage and divorce. When it comes to marriage and divorce, God gives us his best position for us, the worst position that we must avoid at all costs, but then he gives us this intermediary concessionary position. Best, worst, concessionary. The Bible says, some Pharisees came and tried to trap Jesus with this question: should a man be allowed to divorce his wife for just any reason? Haven't you read the scriptures? Jesus replied. They record that from the beginning God made them male and female. And he said, this explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. Since they are no longer two but one, let no one split apart what God has joined together. Then why did Moses say in the law that a man could give his wife a written notice of divorce and send her away, they asked. Jesus replied, Moses permitted divorce only as a concession to your hard hearts, but it was not what God had originally intended. And I tell you this, whoever divorces his wife and marries someone else commits adultery, unless his wife has been unfaithful. Jesus had already said something very similar during the Sermon on the Mount. He said, you have heard the law that says a man can divorce his wife by merely giving her a written notice of divorce. But I say that a man who divorces his wife, unless she has been unfaithful, causes her to commit adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman also commits adultery. Through the law of Moses, God's message to Israel had basically been something like this. Listen, Israel, I'm going to establish you as a brand new nation. You're to be a beacon to the world, a light in the darkness. All the surrounding peoples of the world who are lost in paganism and idolatry, they're going to look at you. They're going to see your righteousness, your health, your prosperity, and they will come searching for me because of your witness. They will see me through you. As such, I need you to be holy as I am holy. I need you to be righteous, merciful, and just. You won't behave in the same way that the pagan nations do. You are going to be different. In the area of marriage then, my best for you is that each man and woman is going to form a couple and make a covenant with each other to stay true and faithful for the duration of their lives. In the pagan nations that surround you, they don't respect their marriage vows. They pick up and drop each other on a whim. They sleep around with each other outside of marriage. They're licentious, they're debauched, and they commit adultery left, right, and centre. This kind of unrestrained sexual immorality, devoid of commitment, is the worst possible position to be in. It's full of pain and disease. Do not do that. Do not do that. Remember, Israel, I want my nation to be different, a beacon of sexual purity and relational faithfulness for all the world to see. With that in mind, I repeat that my best for you is that which I explained to you in the very beginning, that a man should leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. They should be faithful to each other all the days of their life. They should provide each other with love, security, friendship, and they should take care of each other's sexual needs. Again, this is my best for you. Having said all this, I'm not naive about your nature. I know the fallen beings you become. I know the sin that lives in the darkest recesses of your heart, and I know your propensity for selfishness. Therefore, I know that many marriages won't go as planned. There will be unfaithfulness within some unions. Adulteries will happen. Abuse will happen. Marriage vows will be broken. Therefore, even though it's not my original plan, and even though it's not my best for you, as a concessionary position, I will allow divorce under very limited circumstances. Where there is unfaithfulness, you are permitted, as a last resort, to part ways. That was a paraphrase of what God said to Israel through the law of Moses, and what Jesus reaffirmed and gave strength to in Matthew 5 and 19. In those places we are given God's best, which is lifelong faithful commitment. We are also given God's worst, that we must avoid at all costs, which is sexual promiscuity with no commitment at all, like what the pagans practiced. But then we are given a third concessionary position based on the reality of human nature, which is divorce. Jesus said Moses permitted divorce only as a concession to your hard hearts, but it was not what God had originally intended. Even though divorce isn't what God originally intended, even though it's not what he wants, even though he hates it, even though it's awful, he allows it under very limited circumstances. Let's turn to Malachi 2:16 here. For I hate divorce, says the Lord, the God of Israel. To divorce your wife is to overwhelm her with cruelty, says the Lord of heaven's armies. So guard your heart. Do not be unfaithful to your wife. This passage leaves us in no doubt about how much God hates it. He detests it. Do everything in your power not to be unfaithful so that there's never any grounds for divorce, is his message. And yet he does offer the concession. He does make it a possibility, because a nation who attempt marriage faithfulness and who have a percentage failing is still better than the worst case scenario, which is no one attempting marriage faithfulness at all. Furthermore, God knows that if there's absolutely no escape from marriage whatsoever, it would condemn some innocent people to lifetimes of abusive, cruel, unfaithful partnerships. So again, there's a best, there's a worst, and then there's something in between which is neither the best nor the worst. Now then, in the absence of direct biblical teaching on the issue, let's just consider for a moment. I know some people are champing at the bit to say, what about this verse? What about this verse? I promise you, we will get to all those verses. That side of the story is on the way. And remember, I'm not yet taking sides here. I'm just trying to give both sides a fair hearing. So let's just consider for a moment whether a case could be made for masturbation on these same grounds. In other words, let's consider the argument that masturbation could be the concessionary position in a three-state solution. Rather than God saying it's good or evil, right or wrong, black or white, let's consider the argument that while it may not be God's best for us, it may not be his worst either, and that under very limited circumstances, it may be permitted.